"Sell the lake house and the Jaguar too," Vanessa said without blinking. My son just nodded, avoiding my eyes. They thought I was too old to notice the forged signature on the deed, but the envelope my late husband left me had other plans. You'll want to see how silence speaks louder than revenge. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you couldn't see the knife until it was already in your back? "Tell me, where are you watching from tonight?" I was sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Spencer's clinic, watching rain trace pale veins down the glass. The room smelled of lemon disinfectant and quiet despair. People sat in silence, pretending not to hear the low hum of the old clock that counted every second of our aging bodies. My hands rested on my cane knuckles, pale a stillness I had learned to master. Michael had driven me there that morning, though he didn't come inside. He said parking was impossible, that Vanessa needed him on a call. I didn't insist. I had learned that love, when it grows tired, prefers errands to eye contact. Through the window, I saw him standing beside the car phone, pressed to his ear, nodding obediently, while Vanessa spoke from the driver's seat. When the doctor called my name, I smiled politely, as women of my generation were taught to do: pleasant, undemanding, manageable. Dr. Spencer said my heart was steady, my blood pressure fair, and that I should avoid stress. I nearly laughed. If only morality came with a prescription. When I left the clinic, their car was gone. Only a short message waited on my phone. "Mom will meet you at home. Vanessa had a business call. Love you, love." Such an elastic word. It stretches until it no longer holds shape. The bus ride home was slow, and the rain had turned to mist, wrapping the city in a blur that made everything look kinder than it really was. At my age, memories tend to overlap with reflections on wet glass. Each street corner looked like one Robert and I had once walked together. He used to say rain made everything honest, it washed off pretense. I wondered what he would have said about the storm that was brewing inside our own family. When I reached the estate gates, a new sign leaned against the brick wall. "For sale." The paint was still wet. I stood there, umbrella dripping, staring at the sign like it was a stranger who had stolen my name. Inside the house felt wrong. Too clean, too quiet. The scent of Vanessa's perfume lingered in the hallway, that expensive floral tone that smelled like ambition. I found the maid's closet half empty. Even the small silver tray where I used to leave Robert's watch was gone. I boiled water for tea because that was what control looked like when everything else fell apart. The kettle's whistle filled the silence like an alarm I refused to acknowledge. When I poured, my hands shook, but not from weakness. Grief has its own tremor, invisible to others, but impossible to stop. From the parlor, I could see the framed photograph of our family at the lake house. Michael was 10, holding the fishing rod Robert had given him. Vanessa wasn't part of our story yet. She came later, polished, decisive, a woman who always looked like she belonged to the next chapter before anyone else started reading. She had charm, I'll admit that. People like Vanessa build their kingdoms out of confidence and timing. She never raised her voice, never argued, she just spoke in statements that left no room for discussion. Over time, I realized that charm is simply manipulation with a mirror. You only see yourself in it until it's too late. By evening, they hadn't returned home. The housekeeper told me they had a dinner meeting with a potential buyer. Buyer. The word tasted like rust. I asked which property, but she didn't know Mrs. Carter Hayes handles everything now. I stood at the balcony watching the last light drain from the lake below. The water had turned the color of old steel. It reminded me of Robert's eyes, the day we signed the deed to that house, proud, tired, certain. He believed property was more than wealth, it was history. A family without land forgets its roots, he used to say. I whispered his name then, as if the air still remembered him. The wind didn't answer. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the hallways, barefoot, each step echoing like a question. When I passed Michael's old room, I found it spotless, too spotless. Drawers, empty, walls bare. The bedspread folded like an apology. My son had been slowly moving out without saying a word. In the study, the desk lamp still worked. It cast a small, lonely circle of light. I sat down and opened the top drawer. There, beneath a stack of unused stationery, lay the envelope Robert had given me the week before he died. For Margaret, open when you're ready. I ran my fingers along the wax seal. The paper had yellowed slightly, the way time leaves fingerprints on everything it loves. I remembered his voice that morning at breakfast, calm teasing. Promise me you'll keep that envelope somewhere safe. It's nothing urgent, just something for peace of mind. Peace. That's the word widows learn to mistrust. I placed the envelope back in the drawer, but something inside me shifted. The kind of awareness that starts as a whisper and grows into resolve. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like prey. The next morning, sunlight crept through the lace curtains, fragile and hesitant, as if testing whether it was welcome here. I brewed coffee instead of tea, Robert's habit, not mine, and sat at the breakfast table alone. The china set was new glossy white chosen by Vanessa. The old porcelain with blue rims had disappeared. She said they looked too nostalgic. As I sipped, I heard the front door open. Their voices drifted in cheerful rehearsed. Vanessa laughed, that effortless laugh she reserved for social occasions. "Margaret, good morning," she called from the hallway. "We didn't want to wake you last night." The dinner went wonderfully. Michael followed her carrying folders and a laptop. "Mom, we're just sorting out some paperwork for the family trust," he said, avoiding my eyes again. "Paperwork?" I asked, my tone light. "Yes, just simplifying things," Vanessa added. "You know how complicated Robert's arrangements were? We want to make it easier for you." Easier. A word that always means the opposite. She smiled, opening her folder, spreading documents across my table, legal pages, printed emails, valuations. Her perfume clouded the air again, sweet but sharp. I caught a glimpse of a property list and the word pending transfer. Something cold settled in my chest. Still, I smiled. "That's thoughtful of you," I said. "I've always trusted your efficiency." Vanessa's eyes flickered a small, involuntary reaction like surprise meeting opportunity. "Well," she said smoothly, "we just want what's best for everyone." I nodded, watching the reflection of the documents in my coffee cup. The ink shimmered faintly as if even the words were lying. That night I walked the garden path Robert had built with his own hands, stone by stone, lined with lavender. The moonlight fell across the hedge like thin silver scars. I realized I had been living in a story other people were writing for me. I stopped by the lake, its surface calm, deceptive. From here you could see the outline of the house across the water, our summer home, the one now marked for sale. I closed my eyes and whispered into the wind, "All right, Robert, I'm ready now." When I returned to the study, I opened the drawer and picked up the envelope. The wax cracked softly like a secret surrendering itself. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. His handwriting was steady and sure. "If you are reading this, my love, it means I am gone. The assets are safe under your name. Don't be afraid of silence, it's your greatest weapon. Some lessons can only be taught through calm." The tears didn't come, only clarity. I placed the letter back carefully, blew out the desk lamp, and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the house breathe. Tomorrow, I decided, would be the day I stopped pretending not to notice. The next morning, sunlight came sharp and clean, the kind that pretends to disinfect everything it touches. Vanessa was already on the terrace, phone in hand, voice smooth and efficient. From where I sat, I could hear her saying words like transfer, final signature, and liquidation. Michael sat at the table beside her, nodding, flipping through documents without reading. When she noticed me, she smiled, that curated expression she used for both clients and in-laws. "Good morning, Margaret. We're finalizing the details for the trust restructuring," she said, pouring herself orange juice as if it were champagne. "Trust restructuring," I repeated softly. "That sounds significant." "Oh, it's just simplifying things," she replied, waving her manicured hand. "You shouldn't have to worry about all this technical nonsense." Michael glanced at me but said nothing. His silence was a kind of consent. I realized then that silence runs in families, it just changes its purpose. After breakfast, Vanessa insisted I rest. "You've been through so much lately," she said, placing her hand lightly over mine, a gesture rehearsed for empathy. "Tonight we'll have a nice dinner together, just us. I want to celebrate how well the transition is going." The word transition carried the weight of burial. I spent the day walking through the garden, tracing Robert's old path by the lavender hedge. The scent used to soothe me. Now it smelled like something being covered up. I noticed new tire marks near the garage. A moving van had been there recently. By evening, the housekeeper confirmed that some of the antique furniture had been relocated to storage. Vanessa's idea, apparently. When I asked where the woman shrugged, Mrs. Carter Hayes said it was all part of the process. The process. I'd begun to hate that word almost as much as simplifying. By the time dusk fell, the house had changed. It wasn't just the missing furniture, it was the temperature of the air. Even the walls felt complicit. I could hear faint music from the dining room, soft jazz, Vanessa's choice. The kind people play when they're sealing a deal, not sharing a meal. "Margaret," she called sweetly as I entered, "come sit. We're celebrating new beginnings." The table looked staged. Candles, polished cutlery, 2 crystal glasses already filled with red wine. Michael poured a third for me, hesitating only slightly before placing it at my seat. "What are we celebrating exactly?" I asked. Vanessa's eyes glinted under the candlelight. "Progress. We've finalized the sale of the lakeside property. The offer was too good to refuse." I stared at her, my face still, my voice calm. Too good to refuse, or too convenient to explain. She laughed softly. "Oh, Margaret, you've always been so poetic about business. It's just numbers, really." And the house was becoming a liability. "The taxes, the maintenance, that house was built with my husband's hands," I interrupted quietly. "And mine." Michael shifted in his chair. "Mom, please, let's not make this dramatic." Vanessa reached for the bottle, topping off my glass as if pouring calm over chaos. "We understand what it meant to you," she said smoothly, "but you'll see. Once everything is settled, you'll be much more comfortable." I noticed her phone on the sideboard camera lens facing us. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then she adjusted it slightly, aligning it toward me as she sat down again. A recording. Of course. I took a sip of wine, just enough to taste the oak. "Comfort," I repeated. "That's a generous word for losing everything." Vanessa smiled. "You're not losing, you're consolidating. That's how modern estates work. You're still the matriarch, Margaret. We're just managing the details." She placed a stack of documents near my plate, casual like napkins. "There's one form that still needs your signature," she said. "Just a technicality to confirm you're aware of the adjustments." I ran my finger along the edge of the top page. The paper was heavy, expensive. My name appeared at the bottom, already printed. Margaret Hayes. I didn't need to read the rest to understand. "Do you mind if I look this over later?" I asked. Her smile didn't falter, but her pupils tightened. "Of course. But the notary is waiting for confirmation tonight, and it would save everyone time if we finished it now." I leaned back, feeling the soft fabric of the chair against my palms. "Vanessa, I'm 72, not senile. You can stop treating me like a signature waiting to expire." Michael exhaled sharply. "Mom, that's not fair." "No," I said, turning to him. "What's not fair is selling your father's memory under my name." He froze. Vanessa reached across, placing a hand on his arm, a silent command. "Let's all take a breath," she said. "We're family. No one's trying to hurt anyone here. Family." Another elastic word. I picked up my glass again, noticing my reflection in the wine, small, steady, refracted. "You said something about new beginnings," I murmured. "Funny, that's exactly what I was thinking." Her smile wavered for just a second, enough for me to see the machinery beneath it. Dinner continued in polite fragments, weather investments, the mayor's new policies. each word carefully chosen, each silence sharper than the last. I excused myself, early claiming a headache. In the hallway, I paused near the sideboard. The phone was still there, red light blinking faintly. I turned it off with one deliberate tap, then repositioned it facing the empty chairs. If she wanted a performance, I'd give her one, but it would be mine to direct. Upstairs, I opened Robert's letter again. His handwriting steadied me like a compass. Don't be afraid of silence. It's your greatest weapon. I looked out the window. From here, I could see the reflection of the dining room below, Vanessa refilling her glass, Michael leaning back defeated. They had no idea the storm they'd invited. The next morning, I found the signed copy of the paperwork sitting neatly on the kitchen counter, as if someone had assumed I'd done the predictable thing. I slipped it into a drawer instead, unopened. By noon, Vanessa had arranged a consultation with the family lawyer. She insisted I attend for transparency. When I arrived at the firm, she introduced me to a young associate I'd never met before, a man who smiled too much and spoke too fast. "Mrs. Hayes, everything's in order," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "We just need your final authorization to transfer holdings to the secondary trust." Vanessa chimed in, her tone gentle but firm. "It's all legal, Margaret. We're just protecting you from potential liabilities." I nodded slowly, pretending to scan the documents. What they didn't notice was my glance toward the brass nameplate on the door, Wallace & Co. Robert's old friend, Edward, had once been a partner there. Perhaps he still was. I thanked the associate politely and said I needed more time. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she maintained composure. "Of course," she said. "We'll wait." When she stepped outside to take another call, I asked the assistant quietly, "Is Mr. Edward Wallace still practicing here?" He looked surprised. "Yes, ma'am. Semi-retired, but he still consults occasionally." I smiled just enough to be unreadable. "Please let him know Margaret Hayes would like to speak with him, privately." That afternoon back home, Vanessa asked if I was feeling all right. Her tone was syrup-sweet. "You seemed distracted earlier," she said. "Just tired," I replied. "I suppose transition takes energy." She smiled, satisfied, and turned away. But as she walked out, I whispered under my breath so low she couldn't hear, "I'm done being your transition." That night, I sat at Robert's desk, the letter beside me, and began to make a list. Names, dates, properties. Every betrayal leaves a trail. They thought I was drifting into silence, but I was already plotting my return. When I arrived at Wallace & Co. the next morning, the sky was the color of dull steel, and the air smelled faintly of rain and old paper. The marble floor inside still gleamed the same way it had when Robert and I walked there years ago to sign our first property deed. I remembered the way he had held my hand steady and proud. Now I was walking that corridor alone. Edward Wallace was waiting behind his desk. He looked older and broader. His hair turned silver, but the same sharp eyes remained the kind that had once read people faster than contracts. "Margaret Hayes," he said, standing up with a faint grin. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," I answered, returning the smile that wasn't quite a smile. He studied me for a moment, the kind of look that measured not your words, but what they were hiding. "I heard about Robert," he said. "I'm sorry I couldn't make the funeral." "He would have forgiven you," I replied. "He forgave everyone." He gestured toward the chair opposite. The leather creaked as I sat down. "I'm guessing this isn't a social visit," he said. "No," I replied. "It's about survival." I told him everything. Vanessa's charm, Michael's weakness, the sale of the lake house, the signature that wasn't mine. He didn't interrupt once, only poured coffee from a silver pot, listening with that calm stillness men like him reserved for the truth. When I finished, he leaned back, rubbing his chin. "Do you have proof the signature was forged?" "Not yet," I said. "Only instinct." But instinct kept this family alive long before Vanessa decided to manage it. He nodded slowly. "Robert once mentioned a secondary company under your name. Do you still have those papers?" I reached into my handbag and took out the envelope Robert had left me. The wax was cracked, the papers inside yellowed with time deeds, share certificates, bank statements, all under my name. Edward scanned the pages, his brow rising. "Well," he murmured, "no wonder they're circling. Everything is still valid, Margaret. That means any sale they've done using your signature is fraud." For the first time in months, my chest felt light. The world had been tilting against me for so long, I'd forgotten what balance felt like. "What should I do?" I asked. "Nothing loud," he said. "Loud favors them. We start small. Quietly revoke the forged documents, gather proof of every transaction. We'll need bank records, witness statements, any messages you can find. I can access her laptop," I said. Edward smiled faintly. "Still braver than you look." He pulled a thin folder from the cabinet. "I'll reopen Robert's file under a different case name. That way, no one will link it to you. And Margaret. There's someone I trust, an investigator named Logan Smith. He's discreet, loyal. You'll want him on your side." "Bring him in," I said. "The sooner the better." When I stepped back outside, rain was falling again, soft but steady. The sound no longer felt mournful. It sounded like movement. That evening, the house was lit too brightly, every lamp turned on as though Vanessa was trying to burn her own reflection into the walls. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, labeled in her looping handwriting, "Storage Furniture A, Donations Miscellaneous." My life sorted into categories that made sense only to her. "Busy day?" I asked. She turned quickly, surprised for a second, then smiled. "Just clearing clutter. You'll thank me later. I usually do," I said. Michael walked in carrying another box. "Mom, we're reorganizing before the new valuation next week." "Valuation for the estate," Vanessa said quickly. "Potential investors want updated numbers. It's all positive." Positive. The word felt clinical, like something from a doctor you no longer believed. After dinner, they showed me a document calling it a record for transparency. I signed it where Vanessa pointed slowly, letting my hesitation show. I wanted her to believe she had won. People like Vanessa need victories as proof of power. The trick is to give them one that leads straight to the fall. That night in my room, I practiced my own signature over and over on blank paper until it looked effortless. If they were going to forge my name, I wanted to learn how to forge myself perfectly, deliberately. There's a kind of power in imitation when it's done by choice. At midnight, I sat by the window watching the lake shimmer in fractured light. Every reflection broke and reformed like a truth, refusing to disappear. Downstairs, I heard Vanessa laugh, a brittle sound, and Michael's quiet murmur in response. I wondered how long before he realized that silence isn't loyalty, it's complicity. The next morning, Edward called. I've reviewed everything he said. We'll start the reclamation process using a private holding. No one will know you're behind it. And Margaret, you must act as if nothing has changed. I've been doing that all my life, I replied. 2 days later, Vanessa arranged a family brunch. The table looked more like a showroom than a meal, pastries lined in perfect rows, cutlery polished to a mirror. Vanessa wore cream silk and confidence. "Margaret, darling," she began, her voice honeyed. "Michael and I have been talking. We think it's time you considered downsizing. The main house is too large for you now." "I see," I said, folding my napkin neatly. "And where exactly do you think I should downsize to?" "We found a lovely apartment near the marina," she said brightly. "Modern, safe, fully serviced. We'll handle the paperwork." "How thoughtful," I murmured. "Change is good," she continued. "You'll have freedom, less responsibility." "I have all the freedom I need," I said quietly. Michael finally looked at me, and for a moment guilt flickered in his eyes, brief and human. But guilt without courage is useless. Of course, Vanessa added quickly, "The house will stay in the family, under the Hayes name." "Whose Hayes name?" I asked. The silence was short, sharp. Then she laughed. "Oh, Margaret, you always make things so dramatic." "I suppose I do," I said. After the meal, she handed me another form transfer of utilities, she called it. I signed with the same calm she mistook for surrender, then placed the pen down. "There," I said softly. "That should make things easier." Her smile widened, all teeth and satisfaction. That night I called Edward again. "Everything's in motion," I told him. "Good," he said. "Let them think they're winning. Keep feeding them rope." For what I asked, so they can hang themselves with it. When the call ended, I went to Robert's study. His photograph still sat on the desk beside the letter. I ran my fingers over the frame tracing his face and felt the old steadiness return. I lit a candle. The flame flickered once, then held still, bright and small, a reminder that quiet things, when steady, can outlast the storm. They believed I was irrelevant, harmless, finished. But they had forgotten something vital. I was the one who had taught Michael how to swim. I could still decide whether he stayed afloat or learned how drowning really feels. Edward introduced Logan Smith 2 days later in his office. The man looked nothing like the investigators one sees in films. No trench coat, no bravado, only a pair of steady eyes and a voice that carried reason, like a clean blade. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, shaking my hand. "I don't ask clients if they're ready. I assume they already are." "I've been ready for a while," I replied. We sat around Edward's desk, the rain muttering against the windows like a witness who had seen too much. Edward spread a few documents between us, copies of forged deeds, recent transfers, and a printed email chain where Vanessa's name appeared in the subject line more than once. Logan scanned the papers in silence. "They used a falsified power of attorney," he said finally. "The signature matches yours almost perfectly, too perfectly. I suspected as much," I said. "I can trace the file origin," he continued. "There's an IP address linked to a real estate agency Vanessa's company manages. If we get screenshots of her communication with the broker, that's evidence of intent." Edward nodded. "Once we have that, we can issue a silent freeze on the assets. Margaret, you'll still appear uninvolved." "I prefer it that way," I said. "Let them believe I'm harmless. It makes people careless." When we finished, Edward stood and offered his hand. "You've got allies now, Margaret. But remember, every war of intelligence is fought in whispers." "I don't plan on shouting," I said. That night, I returned home to find Vanessa hosting a dinner with 2 guests I didn't recognize, polished, overconfident men who looked like they practiced their smiles in mirrors. From the hallway, I heard her introduce herself as executive manager of the Hayes Family Trust. I waited until she noticed me standing by the doorway. "Margaret," she said smoothly, "you should meet our partners. They're helping us diversify the portfolio." I asked. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then recovered. "Yes, of course, the families. You've been so generous, we wanted to make sure your investments are growing." I nodded, saying nothing. I had learned that silence at the right moment is louder than accusation. After the guests left, she approached me in the hallway. "You surprised me showing up like that." "It's still my house," I said. "Of course," she replied lightly, "for now." I smiled faintly. "For now" is such an optimistic phrase. Her expression flickered and she turned away before I could see the rest. The next morning, Logan called. "I've traced the documents," he said. "They altered digital copies of your signature on multiple contracts. The timestamps line up with Vanessa's emails. She used your son's login credentials to mask access. Michael's, yes. Whether he knew or not, it implicates him." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "Then we'll protect him from her, even if he doesn't deserve it." "Understood," Logan said. "I'll secure the files before they can be deleted. Once we have the audit trail, Edward can move to reclaim the titles legally." By afternoon, I had already changed the passwords to the trust accounts under Edward's instruction. Vanessa wouldn't notice yet. She rarely checked anything herself. Delegation was her favorite disguise for ignorance. At dinner, she announced a new investment meeting planned for Friday. "Michael and I will meet with the buyers," she said. "They want to finalize the property transfers." "Which buyers?" I asked. "Just a small group," she answered. "Nothing for you to worry about." "I rarely worry," I said. "It's so inefficient." She laughed politely, but her eyes sharpened as if trying to measure how much I knew. Michael looked between us like a man caught between mirrors, both reflections accusing him of cowardice. That night, I found him alone in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Does she ever let you sleep?" I asked. He looked up, startled. "Mom, please." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," I said. "You've built a house of cards and handed her the wind." He flinched, guilt tightening his mouth. "I thought we were helping you." She said, "I know what she said." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You signed away more than property, Michael. You signed away your spine." He didn't answer, only stared into his glass as if searching for courage at the bottom. The next day, Logan arrived at the estate under the pretext of inspecting the security system. Vanessa greeted him briefly, charmed by his professionalism. She didn't realize his briefcase contained a recording device and a small camera. While she led him around explaining her vision for modernization, he filmed the office where her laptop sat open, emails blinking in real time. Later that evening, I received a call from him. "We've got at her correspondence with the broker and the digital confirmation of the forged deeds. Edward will file quietly tomorrow." "Good," I said. "Keep copies. Let them rest where they can't be touched." He paused. "Mrs. Hayes, you could go public with this. It would ruin them in a day." "That's not what I want," I replied. "Ruin is loud. I prefer education." The following morning, Vanessa strutted through the hallway with a sense of triumph that almost made me smile. She had just hung up a call, her tone sweet with success. "All set," she said to Michael. "The buyers are sending the deposit. Once the wire clears, we'll move forward with the new titles." The new titles, I repeated softly. What an efficient word for theft. She turned, pretending not to hear. That afternoon, I met Edward and Logan again. The evidence folder was thick now, signatures, emails, timestamps, call logs. "We're ready," Edward said. "I'll file the property reversion orders tonight. Once processed, the ownership returns to you immediately." "And Vanessa?" I asked. "She'll receive a notice within 48 hours, Logan said, from Hayes Holdings' legal department." "She won't realize Hayes Holdings is mine until it's too late," I murmured. Edward smiled. "That's the beauty of it." When I came home, Vanessa and Michael were celebrating in the living room with champagne. She handed me a glass I didn't take. To family success, she toasted. "Success?" I asked. "You've certainly redefined it." She ignored the tone, lifting her glass higher. "To new beginnings, Margaret." I looked at her flawless makeup, steady hand confidence so inflated it made its own weather. "Yes," I said softly. "To new beginnings." I left the glass untouched on the mantel and walked upstairs. From the landing, I could see the reflection of the room below, Vanessa laughing, Michael trying to smile. I opened my phone and sent a short message to Edward Proceed. Outside, rain had begun again, heavier now, washing the garden clean. I stood by the window, watching water slide down the glass, like threads of truth, finally unraveling. Downstairs, I heard Vanessa's voice calling out, cheerful, careless, as if nothing in the world could touch her. And I thought, not without sadness, that she was right. Nothing could touch her now except consequence. The papers would be delivered in the morning, not by me, but by her own reflection in the mirror of the law she thought she understood. I closed the curtains, blew out the candle, and sat in silence. It felt less like victory, more like equilibrium returning. They believed they were still in control, but the truth, like water, always finds its way back home. If you were in my place, would you have stayed silent, letting them believe they'd won, or would you have told them the truth before it was ready to be heard? The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, sealed in pale gray paper and embossed with the emblem of Hayes Holdings. Vanessa didn't open it at first. She stood by the kitchen window, coffee cup in hand, turning the envelope over, like it was a riddle she hadn't rehearsed for. When she finally slid it open, I saw the color drain from her face. She read in silence, lips moving slightly, eyes darting across each line. Then she folded the paper too neatly and set it on the counter, as if touching it less could make it less real. Michael walked in a moment later, half asleep, and froze when he saw her expression. "What is it?" he asked. Nothing, she said quickly. Just a notice from the trust. What kind of notice? She hesitated. A legal one. I pretended to be busy with the kettle pouring water with a hand that didn't shake. Something wrong, dear Vanessa blinked, recovering her composure. No, not at all. Routine verification. From whom Hayes Holdings, she said the words brittle as glass. I turned off the kettle. That name sounds familiar. She gave a small, hollow laugh. It should. It's our holding company. Yes, I said softly. Ours. She didn't meet my eyes. By noon, Michael had read the letter, too. His face went pale halfway through, then flushed red with the kind of panic that makes people start blaming air for being too thin. This can't be right, he said, clutching the paper. They're freezing all active transactions. Every transfer, every sale. Apparently someone challenged their legality. Vanessa cut in. Her voice was low, sharp, and almost steady. It's just a misunderstanding. I'll call the lawyers. I sat at the table, stirring my tea. You should, I said. Sometimes the law simply wants to be heard before it forgives. She glared at me, but said nothing. She made 3 phone calls that afternoon, each ending shorter than the last. The calm efficiency she wore like perfume started to fade, replaced by something rawer confusion. The control she once performed so elegantly was beginning to slip. That evening, Edward called me. The freeze has been confirmed. By tomorrow, all the properties return to their original registry under your name. The bank will notify her formally within 24 hours. Thank you, I said. She won't understand at first. She never does, he replied. When I hung up, I found Michael sitting alone in the living room, the letter still in his hand. He looked like a boy again, small in a room too large. Mom, he said quietly, is this your doing? I took a seat across from him. Mine, I asked. You give me too much credit. Then, whoever still believes that truth keeps receipts. He frowned, unsure whether it was a confession or a proverb. Vanessa's scared, he said. She's never scared. Then maybe she's finally human, I said. He lowered his head. I didn't know about the forgery. She said you approved everything. Did you ask me? He hesitated. No. Then you knew enough, I said. For the first time in months, silence between us wasn't cruel. It was clean. The next morning, the second letter came this time by courier. Vanessa met the delivery man at the door, her expression a mask of composure, already cracking at the corners. She opened it at the table without ceremony. Michael stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. The document was brief notification of asset reversion confirmation of fraudulent transfers under investigation and a new management contact listed at the bottom, Mrs. Margaret Hayes, primary trustee and controlling partner of Hayes Holdings. Vanessa's voice faltered. This can't be. Michael snatched the paper, reading faster than his breath. When he reached the signature line, his hands dropped to his sides. Mom, he whispered. I looked up from my tea. Yes, darling, is this real? Most things are, I said once you stop pretending they're not. Vanessa turned to me, her face pale but still defiant. You can't just, I can. I interrupted gently, and I did, quietly. She exhaled through clenched teeth. You don't understand business, Margaret. This will destroy the family. No, I said, it will reveal it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. There was nothing left to argue with. For the rest of the day, she moved around the house like a ghost in heels, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging, whispering to lawyers who no longer answered. Michael stayed mostly silent, wandering between rooms, glancing at me, as if seeing me for the first time, not as the fragile woman he could manage, but as the mother who had been watching everything. By evening, Logan stopped by with Edward. They came to finalize the documentation and ensure the process remained untraceable. Vanessa tried to block them at the door. You can't just walk into my house, she snapped. Edward's voice was calm. This property no longer belongs to you, Mrs. Carter Hayes. We're here on behalf of the owner. Who the hell is that? She demanded. I am, I said, stepping forward. for a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Vanessa laughed a brittle, desperate sound. "You're bluffing." Perhaps I said, but even a bluff can change a game when the cards are real. She tried to reach for the phone, but Logan's tone stopped her. "Ma'am, I'd advise against further contact until counsel reviews your actions. The evidence trail is extensive." Vanessa froze. Her confidence had been her armor. Without it, she was exposed. Michael stood beside her, his shoulders sagging, eyes wet with something that wasn't grief, but recognition. Edward signed the last document on my behalf and handed me the folder. "It's done," he said quietly. Vanessa sank into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. "You planned this." "No," I said, closing the folder. "You did. I just followed your plan to its conclusion." For a long time, no one moved. Rain began again, soft against the windows, the same rhythm that had carried me through every act of betrayal. I looked at Vanessa, her immaculate mask cracking her empire of confidence, folding into silence, and felt neither joy nor pity, only balance returning. "Justice doesn't need an audience," I said. "It just needs patience." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The meeting took place 3 days later in the upper conference room of Wallace & Co. The rain hadn't stopped since the letters arrived. It beat against the tall glass windows, a steady percussion that seemed to punctuate every word we hadn't yet spoken. Vanessa entered first, wearing gray, the color of surrender, disguised as sophistication. Michael followed behind her, pale and heavy-eyed. Edward sat at the head of the long table papers, stacked neatly in front of him. Logan stood near the corner, calm as ever, holding a small digital recorder and a thin leather folder. "Thank you for coming," Edward began. His tone was civil, professional, merciless. "This meeting is to clarify ownership discrepancies in the Hayes estate and related holdings." Vanessa smiled tightly. "Discrepancies. That's a very dramatic word, Mr. Wallace. I assure you, Mrs. Carter Hayes, the drama lies in the evidence, not in my vocabulary." He opened the folder and began reading the first document, the fake power of attorney. This signature, attributed to Mrs. Hayes, was used to authorize property transfers worth several million. It was digitally extracted from older documents, manipulated and reused. "That's absurd," Vanessa interrupted. "Margaret signed those herself." Edward looked at her unblinking. "Our forensic analysis disagrees. So does the timestamp. You were in Paris the day this document was submitted, and yet it originated from your IP address." Michael turned toward her, disbelief cutting through his exhaustion. "You told me it was handled through the firm." She didn't answer. Edward continued, flipping to another page. "Additionally, communications between your personal email and the broker confirm that you initiated the sale without consent. We have screenshots, audio recordings, and financial transfers to an unregistered account under your initials." The air in the room thickened. Vanessa's hand tightened around her glass of water until it trembled. "I didn't," she started, but Logan's quiet voice interrupted her. "Before you continue, Mrs. Carter Hayes, I'd like to play an audio clip recorded on the evening of May 12th. You stated, and I quote, 'She'll never notice the difference. It's just paperwork.'" Vanessa froze. The recording played softly from Logan's phone, her own voice confident and cold, echoing through the room like a ghost that refused to be denied. Michael sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Edward closed the folder. "Based on this evidence, all transactions executed under the falsified authority have been declared void. Control of all assets reverts to Mrs. Margaret Hayes, effective immediately." Vanessa's voice cracked. "You can't do this." "I haven't done anything," Edward replied. "The law has." I had remained silent until then. Watching her unravel was not satisfaction. It was recognition. She had built a tower of glass and finally heard it shatter. "Vanessa," I said softly, "when you took what wasn't yours, did you ever stop to wonder why you could do it so easily?" She looked up at me, eyes wet, makeup smudged. "Because you never fought back." "Exactly," I said. I gave you silence, and you mistook it for permission." She shook her head. "I wanted to build something better. By tearing down what built you," I said. "You called it progress. I call it erasure." Her voice fell to a whisper. "What happens now?" "That depends on what you learn from this," I said. "I've chosen not to press criminal charges, but you will vacate my properties within the week. You and Michael will receive nothing from the trust until the legal review is complete." Michael looked up, tears forming. "Mom, please," I raised a hand. "Don't call me Mom to soften it. The woman who gave you life is still here, but the one you betrayed deserves silence more than apology." He swallowed, nodding. Vanessa's shoulders dropped, the weight of consequence finally settling. "I don't have anywhere to go," she said. "Then start where I did," I replied, with nothing but the truth. Edward signed the final set of documents, passing them down the table. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "you are, once again, the sole owner of the Hayes estate, the controlling partner of all related holdings, and the legal guardian of the trust." "Thank you," I said. "Let's not call it victory, though. Let's call it correction." As the meeting ended, Vanessa remained seated, staring at the papers, as if they might vanish if she blinked. Michael helped her stand his movements, slow, ashamed. They walked out together, not as conspirators anymore, but as two people suddenly aware of gravity. Logan lingered behind, packing his files. "You handled it better than most," he said quietly. "I didn't handle anything," I replied. "I just waited for honesty to finish its work." He smiled faintly. It did. When they left, I stayed by the window, watching the rain streak across the glass. The city outside was blurred clean again. For the first time, the sound didn't feel lonely. It sounded like closure. I thought of Robert, then his calm voice, his patience, the way he believed goodness didn't need to shout. He was right. Justice doesn't shout, it simply arrives. And that morning, it had. The house was quiet again. For the first time in months, silence didn't sound like exile. It sounded like ownership. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air crisp, washed clean. I opened the windows, and the smell of wet cedar drifted in the kind of scent that made the world feel honest again. Edward's office had sent the final documents that morning. The ink was dry, the stamps official, the signatures mine. Everything that had been taken was back where it belonged, not just property, but truth. I walked through each room, slowly touching the walls, as if reacquainting myself with something sacred. Every space carried a memory. In the dining room, Robert's chair still faced the lake. In the hallway, Michael's childhood drawings hung beneath a thin layer of dust. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to decide what kind of silence would live here next. In the study, the letter from Robert still rested on the desk, worn at the edges, creased from being opened too many times. I unfolded it once more, tracing the steady strokes of his handwriting. Some lessons can only be taught through calm. I understood that now. Justice, after all, isn't a shout. It's a return. Outside, the garden had begun to bloom again. The lavender Robert planted was flowering stubbornly purple despite the storms. I knelt to pull away a few weeds, my hands sinking into cool earth. For years, I'd let others tend it, thinking my role was to stay out of the way. But the soil still recognized me. It didn't care how much time had passed. When I looked up, Logan was standing by the gate, hands in his pockets, the same calm presence that had guided the storm to its end. "You're early," I said. He smiled faintly. "Habit. Investigators like to arrive before the noise starts." "There's no more noise," I replied. "That's what peace sounds like," he said. "It confuses people at first." We walked through the garden in comfortable silence. Before leaving, he handed me a small flash drive. "All the files recording statements, they're yours now. I've kept no copies. Some stories belong only to the people who live them." I took it, nodding. "Thank you. You've done more than your job." He shrugged lightly. "You gave me one of the rare cases where truth didn't have to scream. That's worth remembering." When he left, I watched his car disappear down the wet road. The world felt lighter, That evening, Michael came. Alone. He didn't call ahead, he just stood on the porch shoulders, hunched like a boy who'd lost his map. I opened the door, saying nothing. He didn't either. For a long moment, we just stood there, the space between us filled with all the words that had already been said too late. Finally, he held out a small box, Robert's old wristwatch. I found it in the storage unit. He said quietly, "It should be here." "With you." I took it. The watch was still ticking. "He would have wanted you to keep it," I said. "I don't deserve it." "No," I said softly, "but you can earn it." He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. Vanessa left. She said she needed time. Maybe she was right. She always needed time, I said, just never enough of it for anyone else. He exhaled, nodding. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it." I know, I didn't say I forgave him because forgiveness isn't a word, it's a way you choose to breathe again. And I wasn't done breathing yet. He left a few minutes later, his car fading into the dusk. The house was quiet again, but this time the quiet was kind. I spent the night in Robert's chair watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the lake. The surface shimmered unbroken now, like something had finally decided to stop resisting its own reflection. There are moments in life when power doesn't roar, it hums, when revenge softens into clarity, when the ache of betrayal stops feeling like a wound and starts feeling like proof that you endured, that you understood. That was what remained. Not victory, not loss, just the steady heartbeat of what had been reclaimed. At dawn, I walked down to the lake. The water was still holding the sky perfectly. I tossed a single lavender stem into it, a farewell or maybe a promise. The stem floated for a while, then sank, disappearing gently into the quiet. I thought of everything that had happened, the forged documents, the lies, the dinners that felt like performances. And yet what stayed with me wasn't anger. It was precision. Every wound had shaped the boundary of who I was willing to be. I smiled faintly. In the end, people like Vanessa believe power comes from taking. They never learn that real power comes from standing so still that the world finally has to face its own reflection. The sun began to rise gold, slipping across the surface of the water. I watched it spread toward the house, painting the windows with light. For the first time in a long time, it felt like home again. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped losing. And in the stillness, I whispered, maybe to Robert, maybe to myself, justice doesn't need revenge. It just needs time to arrive. Then I closed the gate behind me and let the morning begin.